Hey, what's up guys, Metal571 here, and today we're going to talk about a headphone that if you're subscribed to this channel, I'm almost certain you've either heard of or heard or owned at some point. This is the infamous, famous, whatever you want to call it, the Sony MDR-7506. So why is this headphone so important and so well renowned? Well, I'll get to that, but first of all, what's the purpose of this? This is a professional headphone. In fact, it's so professional that it even just says studio monitor right on it, and that was its original purpose. This headphone dates to a long time ago. The original version, the MDR-V6, was introduced, I believe, in the 80s. And this one came out in the early 90s as a replacement for it. Now, there's been a lot of talk comparing the V6 and the MDR-7506, and I can't confirm because I don't have both of them in front of me right now, the differences between the two, but I will say that I have owned this headphone before. I also, actually, the first headphone that I ever bought that was not intended just for consumer use was the V6, indeed. Then the 7506, and now I have the 7506 again here for review for you guys. So this headphone is really intended for monitoring. It's intended for monitoring in every sense. These are used to hear people making tiny little mouth noises at 10 miles away on a movie set. Like, that's really the purpose of these things. They reveal the tiniest details and are extremely sensitive. They may have I believe I just looked it up, 63 ohm impedance, but don't let that fool you. These things get super loud very quickly. In fact, they got plenty loud from my phone at like half volume. These things are very sensitive and very easy to drive. You won't need an amp for them under like any circumstances unless you have like the weakest laptop output ever. They get super loud, and like I said, they are a professional headphone. They're really made for monitoring, and as such they have a sound to match. That's something that confuses people a lot when they first hear them, but again, I'll get to that more at the end of the real final conclusion for these guys. So as usual, let's start out with the hardware. The headphone's design is timeless. In fact, I think that when I think of a headphone, a full-size headphone, this is exactly the shape that people draw out. It's just the classic full-size headphone. Now, the parts here are very easily replaceable. You can even see this is so industrially designed that you've got these Phillips head screws all over the headphone, and they're just plainly in sight here. And it's funny because it just goes to highlight the replaceability factor and the professional repairability of this headphone. Now, of course, these are folding, as you would expect. Actually, that seems like they fold better when you extend these arms a bit more. There we go. That's better. So they fold so you can take them with you places. And I actually have it here. The bag also comes with them. By the way, these are definitely 100% genuine. I got these off of Amazon. A real MDR-7506. These are so popular there are fakes out there. It kind of holds true with the M50 as well. Sony, white lettering. It's not, there's no texture to it or anything. It's just a nice feeling genuine leather bag. At least it feels like it to me. I don't know, maybe it's not. But anyway, white lettering. The headband should be flat like this. It shouldn't have any creases in it along here or along here. And you should be able to hear the clicks. On the right side, it clicks as you go down. On the left side, it clicks more as you go up. So From what I've read, those are the signs of a genuine 7506, which this definitely is, because I bought it from a reputable seller, brand new. Again, the hardware is very replaceable. It's built really well. From what I've read, again, the originals were a little bit better. They were all metal. This one is apparently only like metal plated, or parts of it have metal, that kind of thing. It's changed a bit over the years, but the same basic design is here. And the drivers, aside from the magnets, are pretty much the same as well, as far as I know. You can correct me in the comments. Some people are probably know everything about this headphone that's ever happened to it, so feel free to add to the discussion in the comments. Anyway, so the hardware is, again, very solid, very replaceable, well built. It's just the kind of the benchmark for what a studio headphone should be. Now, comfort wise, here's where things get a little iffy. These are not the biggest earpieces in the world, that's for sure. The ear cups don't have a lot of depth to them, but thankfully there's some foam lining that's underneath this fabric you can see here. But there's some foam lining that kind of goes around, and it helps to cushion against your earlobe, which inevitably, at least in my experience, rests on the inside of the ear cup. It kind of goes like around, like your ear kind of goes into it like this and kind of rests like that in it. And I wasn't a big fan of that. For short listening, it wasn't a big deal, but when I'm watching Netflix for like hours, and it's going to be an annoying problem. At least for me, it was. Now, there is a solution to this. These pads are known to wear out quickly, and a lot of people replace them with the Biodynamic EDT 250 pads, which I'll link that in the description. Those are very commonly used as a replacement, and they do fit well. I've used them in the past. As far as changing the sound, they remove a little bit of isolation. They tilt the sound a little bit more toward the bass rather than the mids and the highs, so be aware of that. But they are so much more comfortable and a lot deeper, so if you're going to use this headphone for long periods of time, that should be something you do, is replace those ear pads. Now, with hardware and comfort out of the way, let's talk about the sound of these guys. So what do I think about the bass? Now, the bass on these is probably the highlight of the sound signature. A lot of people, I've heard claims like, oh, these go out to 5 hertz and they're like so flat. Okay, the bass is notably clean, which is kind of paraphrasing another website's review that I've heard. I quite agree with that. It is notably clean for a closed headphone that was designed so long ago. And it does go pretty deep, but I will say there is a cutoff. It's not a perfect bass response at all. These are verging on what I would call vintage headphones, honestly, at this point with their design. And as such, you do get that bass drop off below maybe, say, 50 hertz. You get a lot less response there. But, you know, I was surprised with EDM. They really go pretty deep. I can't really, just by listening to it, I couldn't tell you, oh, it's exactly 6 dB down at 20-30 hertz. You can see the results in some frequency response curves that are easy to look up. Just Google like MDR-7506 frequency response and you'll find tons of them. But I will say the bass has a nice punch to it, and maybe slightly north of neutral for what someone is looking for that's looking for a completely reference headphone. I think it's pretty close, in my opinion, to neutral. And it sounds really good. I'm a fan of the bass on these, for sure. Mids. Alright, here's where the problem starts for me. So, the mids on this headphone, you guys know how I feel about strong upper mid-range, or my definition of strong upper mid-range. Maybe it's a little bit excessively picky, but I'm going to start with the problem in the lower mid-range of these, and actually you can see this on a lot of measurements. There's a notable dip in the low mid-range, which kind of hurts the body of vocals. And I didn't actually notice this so much until I listened to some TV shows that I've been watching with these headphones, and I was surprised at how much thinner voices sounded. So yes, there is definitely a dip in the low mids, and kind of gives it a hi-fi-ish sound, because you've got that well-extended bass that sounds sort of north of neutral, kind of because of the dip in the mids, if you can understand what I'm talking about there. So yeah, you got some loss of body in the low mids, and now the mid-range on these, other than that low dip, is so clean in timbre, meaning I feel like it's very uncolored in terms of how the mid-range is shaped. Like, it does peak at like exactly the right 3.5K point that is suggested as a peak by the way the human ear hears a headphone sound. However, again, it's excessive, and it's excessive in two ways, both the amount, which is not as bad as I remember. I've had these before, and my first complaint was incredible upper mid-range pain. That was what I always thought, and I listened to them again, and it's not as bad as the treble, which I'll talk about in a second. But the mids are definitely a bit forward. The larger problem is the grain. The grain throughout this headphone in the mids and the treble is disappointing, honestly. Now, again, this is only in like an $80 headphone nowadays, so I'm going to excuse that to a degree. But again, this is kind of a vintage headphone design. I really still think of this as a vintage headphone, and for its time, I'm sure it was amazing. But by today's standards, what you can get in the just $100 is, I feel, a cleaner response than this, and much smoother and more equalizable, which I'll get into that a little bit later as well. So these headphones sound very precise, but they're also too hyped in the upper mids and too grainy, at least for me. Now, I'll talk about why that might be useful for somebody later. So the treble, okay. What was interesting with this headphone is I always thought of it as a mid-range cannon, but wow, the treble is super powerful on this headphone. It's not like a biodynamic. It seems to be, the spike that I'm hearing seems to be centered something at like 10K. So really what these headphones kind of sound like is a hi-fi system that's had its treble maxed out and torn off, with the bass at about perfectly halfway, maybe 1 o'clock on the dial. That's kind of what these sound like to me, and it's what you get. The other problem is, once again, the grain continues throughout the treble. Even if you try to remove the spike with EQ, you still got some ringing going on, and it hurts the overall cleanliness of the tone of the headphone. And along with that, unfortunately, the upper octave far above 10K, where my hearing tends to cut off, is also pretty unrefined and not completely present. So these don't sound as high fidelity in general as some other more recent designs. You've got the powerful upper mids, but not as powerful as the strong 10K treble, and then you've got a pretty sharp cutoff, something like 12-13K, and it just kind of dies from there, and you don't get much detail beyond that. And then the bass is nice. I really like the texture of it, but again, it cuts off before some modern headphones because it's an older design. So the soundstage actually surprised me. I know these aren't known for their soundstage, but I'd place it somewhere between the M50 and the DT770. It wasn't as bad as I thought. I'm not great at describing soundstage, guys, but I thought these were going to sound more closed in than they actually did. That could be because the 7506 is a little bit different than the V6, and I was used to more in-your-head feel, because I believe these are wired slightly differently. Anywho, soundstage was okay, but nothing great. Isolation was actually, I wasn't too impressed. I remember the isolation being better, and my coworker could actually hear music. I was playing through these, probably because they're so harsh, even when I wasn't turning them up that much to prevent like hurting my ears from listening to what I was listening to, and he could still kind of hear what was going on, which was disappointing because a lot of people like to use these in the office. I don't know if the earpads I got are bad or what was going on, but Isolation wasn't as good as I remember. It doesn't really match SRH 440s like the ones I'm wearing. Other kings of isolation would be the HD 280, HD 380 is very good as well. So it's not really up there with those. It's kind of middle of the road, which I was surprised by that. Who knows? Could just be variation with my pair. So with all that out of the way, so why is this headphone recommended so much, and why do so many people use it? My best guess is that, one, people have never heard audio quality at this level even before. And for the professionals out there, what I really think this headphone does is it brings forward a lot of nastiness. This is definitely the headphone where if you try to make a song sound good on this, it will sound good everywhere, like everywhere, because this thing is so like gritty and sharp that if you mix something with these, it'll end up being relaxed pretty much everywhere else you listen to it, except for maybe like the $2 earbuds from Walmart. I don't know. So it's the ability to pick up a boom, like rumbling in the bass while recording on like a movie set or live, or sound engineers, and its ability to hear the sharp treble really strongly, very, very loudly, to pick up on details that you may not otherwise pick up on. That's really what I think is why these are so popular in the professional trade. These are extremely common among sound engineers. And from an audiophile's perspective, like me, I still can't figure out why, other than what I just described, because other than that, the sound here, it doesn't sound anything like neutrality to me. This is a V-shaped headphone, period. That's what I think. Some people think this is the definition of flat. I think it's a V-shaped headphone. So that's how I feel about it. All right, some other things that I forgot to point out. It does come with a coiled cable. It's not removable. Again, another disadvantage of the old design. And yes, there is a screw-on quarter-inch adapter that comes with it, as well as the bag, which I already showed you. So there you have it, guys. This is the MDR-7506, quite possibly the most commonly used headphone in the world, maybe next to the M50 and M50X. It's recommended all over the place, but in my opinion, it's only recommended for professional sound engineers. This is the NS10 of headphones. It sounds very specific. People are very used to hearing everything through it, and as a result, it gets used a lot because it's so familiar, and it gives you a lot of details that are hard to hear in other headphones that come through super clear in this one. But overall, I just don't find it that enjoyable to listen to. It's just not fun for me. And so, if you're an audiophile, I would say buy with skepticism and buy this thing somewhere where you can return it. If you're a professional, you know exactly what you're getting because you probably have 63 pairs of these already in the studio. So I don't need to even make this review for you. You already know why you love this thing. And so that's my take on the MDR-7506, quite possibly one of the most popular headphones in history. Thanks, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. I'm always on there checking that, and I'll see you in the next review. Take care.